It's 8:01. Just want to welcome everyone to Almond Board's Training Tuesday, Cover Crops and Pollinator Habitat Opportunities. We have quite the lineup for today with Josette Lewis going to do an overview of cover crop BMP. And then we have Winter Vaughn, who is from Monarch Joint Venture, and she's going to talk about the free seed program that they have. Then we have Rory Crowry, who's going to talk about seeds for bees with Project APSM. And we have Billy Sneak from Bee Friendly Farming or Pollinator Partnership, excuse me, Billy, and he'll talk about their Bee Friendly Farming program. And then we also have two growers with us, Christine Gimperly and Ken Rapp, who will discuss about their experience using these programs. And then we'll have a Q&A session, and then Josette will do the closing and how to access all these programs and more information. So just a quick reminder for navigating Microsoft Teams, all of you attendees will be muted and won't be able to access your camera. However, we highly encourage you to pose your questions in the chat icon. This can be found in different locations depending on what device you're using. We also will be adding in links and contact information through the chat, so check that to access these resources. And then this course does offer CCA credits, 1.5 hours of sustainability. And at the end of the session, we'll display a QR code for you to get your credits for their app. And with that, I will pass it over to Josette.
Thank you. Great to be here today. This is actually National Pollinator Week, so great opportunity for growers to consider how adding pollinator forage and habitat can be beneficial to their production practices, as well as demonstrating that almond growers are responsible farmers and part of healthy ecosystems. So great to be with you here today. Next slide, please. So the Almond Board funded a very comprehensive 3-year research project looking at cover crops and the implications for a broad variety of aspects of both management in the orchard, as well as benefits to the production of almonds specifically. And so you'll see here in this diagram that the degree of comprehensiveness that was analyzed. This looked at 3 different grower sites, ranging from Corning up north to Merced in sort of the middle of the growing region, and all the way down to Arvin in Kern County. So very diverse soil types, diverse microclimates, and production practices. In addition, we have funded research specifically looking at the question of whether adding a cover crop or floral resources outside of the orchard would compete with bee visits to the almonds. An important question for growers is whether adding flower covered crops or flowers that might bloom outside the orchard at the same time as almonds could take away those very important and expensive honeybees that you bring into the orchard. Very resoundingly, that research showed there is no competition. The almond beats all other flowers in terms of attractiveness to the honeybees, so no problems there. So all of the research that I'll talk about and some of the management practices that you'll hear about have good science behind them that come from these research projects. You don't have to read scientific papers to benefit from that because we have a really excellent and easy to read cover crop best management practice guide for almonds that takes that research together with grower experience, experience from the cooperative extension specialists, CCAs and PCAs, a lot of interviews that distills that into some really practical and easy to use information. So very much encourage you to pick up a copy of the Cover Crop Best Management Practice Guide, and I'll pick out a few highlights for you this morning. Next slide. So the first question is why think about a cover crop, whether that might fit for your operation. Research shows that there are a number of potential benefits from using of a cover crop, and I'll share some of that data with you. I think we're all very attuned in this drought year of how important getting every drop of water we can to convert into health of the tree and a high yielding almond. So I would say some of the key reasons to consider a cover crop is to improve water infiltration into the soil and reduce compaction. Something that builds up in the orchard because of the equipment that we have to drive through there. This is a persistent problem across many soil types in most regions. And so considering a cover crop to use those roots to help improve soil structure will increase water infiltration. There is a potential that long-term use of cover crops adds organic matter to the soil that can also help improve water holding capacity, but that research is still ongoing. I'll also talk, next, just click through, I'll also talk a little bit about management of salinity and sodicity, a problem that many regions of California face, and where cover crops can help improve that. Sodicity is also not just a stress for the tree, but also related to soil structures, which gets back to water infiltration and compaction. So some really important things to think about there. It is National Pollinator Week, and we're going to hear some great speakers that follow me to talk about the co-benefits for pollinators. But there are other benefits that you might consider. Increased access during winter months when you have a cover crop. You're not going to be driving in on bare soil that could be muddy, which then could increase your compaction problem. The cover crop helps provide a nice surface to access the orchard. There's some evidence that beneficial insects are attracted to, whether it's habitat outside of the orchard or inside the orchard, so you can get some additional integrated pest management benefits. I'll talk briefly about suppressing soil nematodes, and I think we have some growers here who have some real good experience with that. And also improving some of the organic matter and the biology in the soil that is important for nutrient cycling, so reducing leaching and loss of applied fertilizer, as well as managing weeds, something that we all face. All right, so next slide. All right, so this is the data from that research project on improved water infiltration. This is after just 2 years of a planted cover crop in these orchards. And you can see across the board, there is improved water infiltration, those dark bars that you see there using what's called the soil builder mix. I think these are both Project Apis M seeds for bees types of cover crops. And the species that were selected there specifically to help improve soil quality. And you can see in all 3 sites, particularly in the drier parts of the state, in Merced and Kern County, significant improvement in water infiltration over both resident vegetation in the form in Tehama County and over bare soil in Merced and Kern. Some really good evidence of the benefit there. Next slide, please. And this is looking at salinity or sodicity. So they took a lot of soil samples, and you can see different colors there represent different types of cover crop mixes, the soil mix, the pollinator mix. Resident vegetation is the gray lines, and bare soil is the red lines. And the 3 sites are Tehama, Merced, and Kern. So you can see, particularly at the Tehama and Merced sites, really significant improvements in salinity and sodicity associated with any living cover crop, whether resident vegetation or any seed mix from a planted cover crop over bare soil. So something to consider depending on your soil type and the problems that you're encountering there. Next slide, please. So why are we talking about cover crops at the end of June? Because if you have planted a cover crop, you should have terminated by now by mowing to make sure that you can manage that residue in time for harvest. But as you will see, if you pick up a copy of the cover crop B&P guide, that this is a great time of the year to start thinking and planning for a cover crop that you would put in the fall. So this is a nice chart that walks you through the main components of installing and managing a cover crop. And you can see before harvest, when things aren't too crazy, is a good time to start planning for it. You want to think about what are those goals that you might have, those problems that you're trying to solve in the orchard. What does that mean for potential seed mixes? Best cover crops are always a mixture of different plant species to give you the greatest chance of good establishment, given we don't know how much rain we might get in the fall, as well as to help you balance different goals you might have, including things like brassicas, those yellow mustards that are great for honeybee health, as well as potentially for nematode control, versus adding clovers and grasses that can have additional soil and nutrient benefits. So it's a great time to start investigating what your options are, where you might get some technical assistance, where you might access the right kind of seed, and how you're going to, and what kind of equipment you want to use to plant that cover crop. So all the speakers you'll hear from here are sources of that great information, so great time to start thinking about it. Next slide, please. In working with growers and cooperative extension, you were pretty aware of what some of the concerns are that growers have in terms of the practicality of managing and planting a cover crop. It's not a one-size-fits-all. It's not a prescription for success for every single grower in every single region, but there are a number of misperceptions out there, and also a number of ways to manage some of the challenges or the downside risks. So I just wanted to make sure I touch upon those. First and foremost, we hear a lot about is water. How, I live in a drier part of the San Joaquin Valley. Obviously, Merced and Arvin are not, don't get nearly as much moisture and precipitation as they do up in the Sacramento Valley. But I think you'll hear from growers who have had success even in the San Joaquin Valley. The key thing is to seed the cover crop within 2 weeks of an anticipated rain. That's the best likelihood for success without adding any additional or external moisture. Many growers have micro sprinklers and drip, and really don't even have the option of extending that irrigation to the middles where the cover crop would be planted. I have heard of some folks using water trucks and sort of going through after planting and giving the cover crop a drink and a chance for success using water trucks that are can bring in some supplementary water on a temporary basis. In terms of cover crops potentially competing with the trees, research shows that so long as you terminate in the spring, the cover crop does not increase evapotranspiration. It's not taking water out of the soil and releasing it into the environment at a significant level that competes or draws water away from the trees. So no significant concerns there. And again, at least research to date has shown that the net benefit of improving water infiltration during those winter rains more than offsets the potential concerns about water use of the cover crop itself. Frost damage, definitely high on our radar after this last spring, where some serious frost damage, particularly up in the Sacramento Valley. That can be managed by mowing the cover crop to less than 2 inches prior to a heavy frost. So there are ways you can manage that. The cover crop will then have an opportunity to rebound afterwards throughout the rest of the spring, and you can still get some benefits there. Research shows that any kind of vegetation on the soil, whether it's resident vegetation or a planted cover crop, does decrease the soil temperature on the surface. But as you move up into the canopy of the tree, there's a much smaller temperature differential, even if you had a cover crop. So it's not significantly increasing your risk. Navel orangeworm control, specifically now thinking about winter sanitation. Oh, back slide. We strongly advocate winter sanitation, knocking those mummy nuts off the tree and putting them onto the ground, and then using a flail mower. Some concerns about whether using that flail mower will chop up your cover crop and reduce the benefits of it. I think we have a chance to talk to a couple growers here who use different management strategies for that. And it's all covered in that BMP guide. One option is to actually plant the cover crop every other row and do your flail mowing, blow the mummy nuts into the alternate ones that doesn't have the cover crop. And that way you're less concerned about that access to the, really good chopping up of those mummy nuts. So there are good opportunities there. And then lastly, but not least, I wanted to make sure talk about pest management. So one of the concerns of a cover crop is it can increase risk of gophers. They like to eat roots, and your cover crop makes some nice juicy roots. It's also a little hard to see the gopher mounds because of the cover crop. So an important thing there is to terminate the cover crop before it reaches maturity. Make sure you can monitor by walking through the orchard to look for gopher activity. And I would just say that to remember that research also shows that there are some beneficial aspects of a cover crop for pest management when you look at other pests. And maybe Christine, one of our growers who will talk at the end, can talk about what she did when she pulled out an orchard and after whole orchard recycling, planted a brassica intensive cover crop, which you can then, because you don't have an orchard there before replant, you can chop up that brassica and till it into the soil. And that research shows that can have some significant benefits for nematode control. So some challenges with gophers, but some upsides for other pest management. And last, just to talk about harvest. We have always advocated for a clean orchard floor at harvest. And a lot of growers are concerned that a cover crop will introduce too much residue to that orchard floor and impede a clean harvest. Research, as well as a lot of grower experience, and feel free to ask the growers who are on the webinar today, if you terminate the cover crop in the spring, you should have no problem with that residue degrading prior to harvest. Mowing is sufficient. You might have to do a couple of mows over the cover crop growth period so you don't let it get too out of control. But mowing itself is sufficient to give you a clean orchard floor because that residue will degrade in time, and it's not necessary to do a burn down, but that's another option there. So I hope you'll hear some grower experience there when we get to that part of the webinar. I think the last slide is just to show you from this research project. So next slide. This is the orchard in Kern County that was part of that 3-year study. And you can see here after harvest, there's the windrow there, a clean floor, and they had no problem with harvest despite having a very successful cover crop during the life of this research project. So hope that gives you some ideas to think about as you consider whether it fits for your operation this coming fall. And again, encourage you to continue listening in because there's a lot of great technical assistance and some great incentive programs to help you get started. So with that, I will turn it over to Winter Vaughn with Monarch Joint Venture. We're now going to look outside the orchard to some of the other kinds of plants that we could add to the landscape to bring benefit to pollinators and also maybe add some beautiful additions to your home or your orchard area. So over to you, Winter.
Thanks so much, Josette. It's great to be here, everybody. Um, Next slide, please. So I work for Monarch joint venture. Oh, back one slide. There we go. Thanks. So I work for Monarch joint venture. My name is Winter Vaughn, and I am the California Habitat Coordinator for MJV. And I run their California Working Lands Free Seed Program, where I work with private working landowners to establish pollinator habitat throughout the Central Valley and adjacent areas as well. Next slide, please. So Monarch Joint Venture is a nonprofit organization based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We have over 115 partners throughout the United States that we work very closely with. And our mission is to protect monarchs and aid them in their migration by collaborating with partners to deliver habitat conservation, education, and science across the United States. And our vision is to support thriving monarch populations as well as other beneficial insect populations, and to serve as a flagship species to support other plants and animals and really indicate healthy ecosystems and the environment. Next slide, please. So our four main pillars are science, education, habitat, and partnerships. And what I'm going to talk about today is habitat. And you can go to the next slide, please. So the California Free Seed Program has been around for three years now, and I provide free regionally appropriate wildflower seed mixes and native milkweed plugs to help support monarch butterflies and ecological richness in specific areas throughout California. I provide free technical assistance, advice on where you should plant, what resources and contacts are in your region and how to best support you, as well as creating site conservation plans specific to the farmer and to the area that the person is located. Next slide, please. So the timeline for this is, in the beginning of the year, around January, February, March, we are beginning our recruitment and site selection, as well as the seed mix development, where we have certain seed mixes created throughout California to make sure that it's regionally appropriate wildflowers that we're putting in each specific region. And then we're still accepting applications currently to if people are interested in our free seed program to put habitat on their land. During the summertime, these months right now, I provide technical assistance and help with site preparation to ensure the success of the habitat. And then during fall, September, October, November is when seed and plant distribution occurs. And then we do site conservation plans in greater detail, as well as continued technical assistance to aid farmers in successful habitat. And then in spring is around March, April is when the beneficial insects really start coming and the native flowers start to bloom, and it's absolutely stunning. Our mark is to hit at least 3 blooming nectar resources for bees and butterflies in each season. And we've been able to do that. We have over 20 different nectar blooming resources in the mix, not including the milkweed that comes as plugs. And so the habitat starts blooming in spring, and it will continue having nectar blooming resources throughout each season on. And the mixes are built for longevity, so you're not going to have to reseed them. They reseed themselves. So the mixes are comprised of reseeding annuals and perennials due to the mixes and this habitat built for longevity. So you're not going to have to replant it each year. It'll be self-sufficient for years to come. It just needs the proper site preparation and weeding and irrigation, and it usually is set up for success at that point. Next slide, please. Here you can see a lot of diversity between sites. I work predominantly with almond growers, which has been a really stunning experience for me, and There have been so many different sites throughout California, and they all show up differently. You guys will hear more from Ken and Christine later, but they live not too far away from each other, and you can see a complete difference in the same mix about 10 minutes apart, but both successful, but in very different ways. And it's beautiful to see the differences between the two. You know, in the right corner, there's that's on an almond orchard over in Sutter area. And then we have some up in the very far northern region as well, up near Reading on the bottom right. And then you can see Ken's site in the bottom left corner. And it's just beautiful to see all the changing colors and all the bees and butterflies that you see throughout each season. It's a really incredible habitat. It's a super rich resource for pollinators and beneficial insects. So it's really incredible. Next slide, please. So this is Ken's going to be speaking later again, but just a little ode to him is that Ken and Christine, I've both been working with them since the very beginning of this program, and now we're in the third year of it, and it's just been beautiful to see the success and longevity of it. Now in the third year, and he's still reaping the benefits of this habitat and the enrichment that comes from it. And so he sees pollinators and nectar blooming resources throughout each season. And again, he hasn't really had to reseed it or really give it much supplemental seeding at all. So it's just been built for years to come of getting beneficial nectar blooming resources, which has been incredible. Next slide. I have a portion for questions because I am going to have to pop off a little bit early. So if anybody has questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or reach out to I'm sure Gisette or Miranda or myself directly, and I'm more than happy to help support you or answer any questions that you may have. And then the next slide is my contact information. So if you want to write down my email, or that is my personal cell phone number, I'm always here to chat about habitat in any way. So thank you for letting me speak. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Winter. So again, if you have any, definitely jot that down. You'll see a number of links at the end, and very shortly we should have this up on our website, contact information on this program at almonds.com. So thank you, Winter, and make sure if you have any questions to put them in the chat, and she'll be around for a few more minutes before she has to take off for another pollinator related event. So thanks, and again, we'll go on next to Rory and Project Apis M, Seeds for Bees. I think it was a great pleasure to learn about the origin story of this organization, which is really a spin-off from the Almond Board and started by a wonderful woman who was in a similar role, I guess, to I am years ago. So long history of collaboration between almond industry and Project Apis M, as we are just starting the collaboration with Monarch joint venture.
Yeah,
over to you,
yeah,
Rory.
absolutely. Well, thank you, Dr. Lewis. Appreciate it. Man, we are. I'm almost baffled at this. We're having a training Tuesday on forage in the orchard and outside of the orchard. I mean, 10 years ago that would have never happened. So I'm really happy about that. As Dr. Lewis said, my name's Rory Crowley. I'm the director of habitat programs over here at Project Apis M. And Project Apis M has, it was basically developed and designed by an almond grower and a bee scientist, right? And it was a good spinoff from the Almond Board. So just a beautiful program. And then, a couple years into that organization, Seeds for Bees launched. Seeds for Bees just kind of grew out of a bit of a need to see more habitat in the orchards. When bees get there, they're typically, not a lot of floral resources in the orchard. And so Project Apis M wanted to do something different there. And so just going to be giving a little bit of a talk here, the link between better pollination, healthier bees in the soil. Next slide, please. Just so everybody knows, I mean, I was also a producer, still own about 500 acres up in the Chico area. And I've been planting cover crop for about 8 years. In fact, Billy Stink, who's also on with us, coached me through my first cover crop many years ago with Project Apis seeds. So kind of a cool history there too. But Project Apis, we really are the commercial honeybee organization. We focus on 3 areas. I would say that there's basically, kind of a 3-legged stool here. We're research, resources, and forage. We want to enhance honeybee health and crop vitality while promoting land stewardship and food sustainability. That's who we are. That's what we do. That's our goal. And even just this year, and kind of a bit of a shout out to Project Apis since its inception, we've funded over $10 million worth of research going to honeybee research, which is just a tremendous testament to the success of the organization. Dr. Lewis has been a big part of that too on the forage side with us. Almond Board of California has just come through in a major way for all these years. Been a tremendous partner. We work with beekeepers, growers, scientists, industry members, supply chain people, supply chain corporations. There's a lot of interest right now. Happy Pollinator Week to everybody. It seems like everybody wants something to do with pollinators, and Project Apis really stands in the working lands, inside the orchard to plant annual cover crop and forage. And so go ahead and advance the slide if you would. And so I'm going to be focusing on forage. As I said, I'm the director of habitat programs. Got a little bit of experience in the orchard with nematode reductions with brassicas. We actually did some really pretty cool stuff on our ranch, trying to look at some of these other benefits. Dr. Lewis she referenced some water studies earlier that we were a part of, and so there's still a lot of questions that resound around habitat, specifically in orchards and in winter annuals, but that's what we're trying to be a part of here. One of the things I wanted to talk about this year too is we're kind of increasing our goal. We want to try to hit 15,000 cover crop acres. That can be in almond orchards, walnut orchards. We're seeing a lot of increase in walnut orchards. We're seeing some pretty good increase in vineyards. Vineyards have been, either table grapes or wine grapes. They've been growing cover crop for a long time. But we continue to still see almonds being a big part of our Seeds for Bees program. One of the things that we've seen, we put out an annual survey every year. Anywhere from 90 to 95% of growers will continue to plant cover crop after our free seed program. So, are we doing a good job? Is the program working? We think it is, absolutely. Growers on their own time and their own dime will be putting seed in the ground after they get done with our program, which is really a testament to its success. We also look at a couple other factors in that survey. Growers are planting mainly for honeybee health. That was actually the majority question or answer that growers gave when we asked, why are you planting cover crop? My thought would have been it would have been for soil health, and it was a close second. But they're basically, everybody's caring about the bees that are in their orchard. They know what kind of investment this is. So it's a really important step in the right direction. Just grower awareness that bee health is huge, not just their soil, but we know that obviously planting cover crop can help out soil in a number of different ways. Today, I want to look at just focus on 2 areas of our program to kind of help growers understand who we are, what we do, and how we do it. So if you could advance the slide, we're going to talk a little bit about some resources. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we obviously are in the business for, so to speak, is to make sure that bees are being fed prior to the almond bloom. The goal of Seeds for Bees is to have extra density, diversity, and duration of available forage prior to the almond bloom, or when other food for the bees are scarce. There's not a lot of it. So one of the ways we do that is we actually plant cover crop in October. So we target the month of October as our prime month for planting this cover crop. We've got 5 different seed mixes, 4 that we actually kind of plant within the context of the orchard. We're really pushing out Pollinator brassica this year, which is our old mustard mix. It's the same name, but we're pushing the Pollinator brassica this year because it's got a very good price point. I mean, you're going to be getting more scale if you have free seed, and it doesn't take a lot to grow on it in terms of its water need. We saw last year there was just a scarcity of water, especially down in the South San Joaquin. But we still saw pollinator brassica grow up to 4 and 5 feet on 3 inches of water. So when we're in a drought cycle, and because we have a bit of it's a very tough year on growers, we're looking at that pollinator brassica this year as something that we really want to push out as much as possible. So we want to feed the bees, feed the soil, and then one of the other things that Seeds for Bees does is that anytime over the year we're here for technical assistance. We want you all to know how to plant cover crop. I heard a number of things from both Winter and Dr. Lewis talking about planting. Cover crop is, one of the things that I wanted to always tell growers is, as I started getting into cover crop, you really have to start realizing that it is a crop to manage. Even though you're not bringing it to a cash crop scenario, it is still a crop to manage. You still have to pay attention to it. You have to plan how to plant. You have to prepare the dirt. And then you have to think about how irrigation works or precipitation, as Dr. Lewis had talked about. So there are things that you have to do. You have to be intentional about cover crop planting. You can't just go out and throw out seed. You never do that with anything else, But I think at the end of the day, one of the things we want to make sure is that we're planning and planning. So one of the things that we've done is actually create a resource. You can advance onto the next slide, please. So with every bag of seed that we send out, whether you're purchasing seed at a low cost or whatever, or getting free seed, we send out the cover crop BMP that Dr. Lewis talked about, the honeybee BMP hard copy, and then depending on which seed mix you have, we actually send out the planting guidelines as well for that seed mix. But this year we developed a very special tool. If you could advance the slide one more time too. I know this is kind of small print. It's going to be hard for everybody to see, but this is online. We created a Seeds for Bees management quick guide, kind of along the same lines as the cover crop BMPs. Up at the top, there's a couple arrows if you keep advancing. Up at the top, you have a calendar. Kind of just tells you what to do and when over the year. Over on the right, we can advance the slide again. We have a list of resources per time of the year. You can go, where do I go and when? And then over there on the left, kind of goes through the actions at which point in the season you want to be going through and thinking about it. So for example, right now, we're in our application period. Our application extends only for 3 months this year. We're trying to get seed to the door before October 1st. Get your seed applications in now. Next slide, please. Just moving on to application, we tried to make it as easy as possible this year. Our application, projectapstem.org, apply to enroll, or you can go to Project Apstem, and then our Seeds for Bees link, and then it's right there. Scroll down right at the top, and then you'll see the actual application embedded there in the actual website. Next slide, please. And as we finish up, again, we talk about a little bit more. We have 4 seed options. Brassica mix is what we're really, looking for this year, but we do limited availability on the bio build, which was old soil builder. This year, our cost share structure is our first year enrollees. We upped it 500 per year this year, just because we wanted to give growers a little bit more help, because this year is difficult. So if you're a first year enrollee, you get $2,500 off of your overall seed purchase discount. And then if your second year, you get $1,500 off of that. So we also, do discounted pricing with all the purchasing that is done. So if you guys have been out of the application for a while and just want to get free seed, or excuse me, want to get discounted seed, come to us. We buy seed at wholesale, so we get good wholesale margin pricing discounts. We don't also put a margin on it. And we also do free shipping, and you also get free technical advice. So that's kind of the overview of the program. Go to our quick guide. Our quick guide is going to be there as a quick reference tool for you. The application's online. Dr. Lewis will also talk a little bit about that at the end. So that's Seeds for Bees. Thanks for having me. Happy Pollinator Week to everybody, and we're here to help. Give us a call if you need help. One more slide. Here's my contact information as well. And we'll turn it over to Billy.
You go back a slide there. Yeah, just give people a second to get that information, and you'll see in the chat there's links to each of these programs. So if you click on that, it'll open in your browser, and you can come back to it later and have that on hand. But you can also go to almonds.com to the tools and resources section of our website and the grower tools, and you'll find links to all of these programs as well. So lots of ways in case you don't write fast enough. Thanks a lot, Rory. This is a great program, and I just really would hone in on that statistic of 90 to 95% of growers continue to plant cover crop after they participated in the program. I think that's a testament to the value proposition that they're seeing at a time when farming almonds is pretty marginal in terms of the economic return on investment. The fact that growers are doing that is a sign that they are seeing a benefit. So it kind of speaks for itself. Okay, and then the last program we'll talk about, turning over to Billy Sink, is bee-friendly farming, where really kind of puts all of these types of forage and habitat into one certification scheme that can potentially add value to your marketing of almonds. Another great partner of the almond industry is Pollinator Partnership. And over to you, Billy, to talk about bee-friendly farming.
Well, good morning, everyone. I am glad to be here talking with y'all. I want to get right into it. I don't want to talk too much about what Pollinator Partnership does, because that's a whole presentation of itself. We have many partners and many programs throughout the U.S. and Canada. But I kind of want to synthesize a lot of the things you've heard today. How cover crops, how outside of the orchard habitat, how that all works together with marketing opportunities like bee-friendly farming. Next slide, please. I guess I should have said, so my name is Billy Sink. I'm the Pollinator Habitat Specialist at Pollinator Partnership. Miles Dakin, he's actually, I think, on the call, but he has a pretty bad cold right now. But he is the person, Miles is the person that manages the bee-friendly farming certification. So Pollinator Partnership's mission is to promote the health of pollinators, critical to food and ecosystems through conservation, education, and research. That's our kind of mission statement, and it helps build upon resources that people need to know about that are more than just the pollen and nectar that you see in that photo there. Next slide, please. So what do pollinators need? And it's important to remember when I talk about this, I mean all pollinators. I mean the managed honeybees that are there at a very specific time of the year, that are a tool of production ag, that are setting nuts, setting fruit, setting seed, etc., as well as native bees. Sometimes they are helping out pollination in agricultural context. Sometimes they're not, and they're just good for biodiversity, as well as things like monarch butterflies. So what do pollinators need? They need access to abundant, diverse plant life, nectar and pollen resources. Native plants do an excellent job of that. Non-native plants can also do a really good job of that if they're kind of placed in the right area and managed in the right way. Continuous bloom is very important. This is why the quality of it, like a cover crop that's just temporary, for example, this is why it is the quality of it is great for honeybees and native bees, but kind of the overall potential of a cover crop is actually less than something like a habitat for native bees, because outside of the orchard habitat, that's still blooming into June, July, August, and into the fall, whereas a cover crop are not. So that's why all these things have their own unique roles and all play a specific part and are very beneficial. High protein content, carbohydrate content in the pollen and nectar, host plants to complete their biological cycle, like in the case of monarch butterflies. Some of these herbaceous, some of these are woody, like in hedgerows. And we also are concerning ourselves with habitat connectivity. No one grower has to do a whole lot, but if for every 100 or so acres there was a half acre of habitat, you would have a whole corridor of habitat that we didn't have throughout the Central Valley. and reduce, pesticides can negatively affect pollinators as well as ground nesting sites. We'll see some of that next slide, please. So these are some of the things that are just, kind of a photo representation of the thing that pollinators need. Something that, I included this, something that's overlooked a lot is cavity nesting bees. Now, they can be provided their domicile by people creating these things and leaving them out. You can also create this type of habitat by just simply planting hollow stem plants that when they senesce and die, then the bees can get in there and use that as as a means of reproduction. Next slide, please. Same thing goes with ground nesting bees. These are like your bumblebees. So you don't think of a bare patch of ground as being resourceful to biodiversity, but it definitely is. And this is kind of these type of areas just naturally happen when you are planting some habitat, when you are putting in a hedgerow. Next slide, please. Again, there's just another photo of the type of spaces that ground nesting bees can use. A lot of the areas that are a bunch of maybe half alive, half dying plants, stuff that we really wouldn't think of being large enough scale to be beneficial. We might not even think it being pretty enough and colorful enough to help out biodiversity and pollinators. Definitely still is, just by creating spaces like this. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk now about bee-friendly farming and about what that is. Next slide, please. This is the certification program managed by Pollinator Partnership. So far, we have certified over 200,000 acres and more than 6,400 acres of pollinator habitat managed. And why this is important is because you're planting cover crops for soil health and for pollinator health, really helping out manage bees. You may be working with winter, for example, to put in a hedgerow or habitat to help out native bees, increase your beneficial insects, right? And why these things work. People are having to mow maybe one last time per year in their orchard. That's savings there. They're maybe having to spray pesticides because they have more beneficial insects controlling their pests. That's some savings there. What are the larger implications? And it's this certification, right? That industry folks, other growers are looking towards other growers in wanting to do what they're doing. Processors, wholesalers, retailers. This bee-friendly farming logo is starting to make its way onto packages. And just like you've seen, maybe some of your neighbors that grow organically, right? They're getting a premium on their, organic hay or almonds or whatever it is. Folks are getting a premium on their almonds, for example, because the consumer knows that, hey, if I buy these almonds, this grower is going above and beyond and helping out pollinators, helping out themselves, and kind of contributing to that type of agrarian landscape that people appreciate. Next slide, please. So the criteria is pretty simple. Offer temporary forage. That's like your cover crops. That's how to get. I don't know why they're labeled number one, but to get that temporary nutrition, you work with Rory, for example, in the Seeds for Bees program. Plant a cover crop. Provide bloom of different flowering plants throughout the growing season. Right, that's outside of the orchard habitat. Provide permanent habitat, right, for that'll have actual nesting resources. This is some of the photos I've already showed you earlier in the presentation. Provide clean water for bees. Show that you have an IPM program, right? This isn't because we're saying that you are a bad grower if you use pesticides, but it's just helping remind you to test, to track your pests. And, you know, if you can maybe use a little bit less, it'll be better for your wallet. It might be better for pollinators. And it's just kind of to help remind you about some of these practices. Next slide, please. So real quick, I think I'm up on my 10 minutes here, but what is permanent habitat? You know, permanent habitat is something that's outside of the orchard. The seed itself can be very expensive. It's going to bloom for the pretty much the entire year. There's going to be something blooming if you designed it right for maybe 12, but definitely 11 months out of the year. It provides habitat and nutrition, versus a cover crop. Excellent tool, but this is inside the orchard. Per acre, the cost should be a whole lot less. You're able to do a lot more on your land, and it supports the quality is great. It supports native bees and honeybees, but again, it's really important for those honeybees because it's a whole lot of forage at a very specific time. Next slide, please. Just want to remind you guys about some other resources we have on our website, like this pollinator habitat guide. Now, if you work with me, for example, in a project, you'll get a lot of detailed information like this, site plans, species list, but this stuff is readily available to you right now if you just wanted to go check it out yourself. Management tips, species list, kind of spelling out what to expect. Next slide, please. Again, just some nice looking photos, kind of what some habitat can be, and my contact info is on the next slide, please. Advance. Yeah, like I said, Miles, excellent person to work with. He manages the Bee Friendly Farming certification. I'm a person that can help you install some of this habitat and provide you with technical advice on how to do this sort of thing. And I know a lot about cover crops too, so glad to be here and making sense out of all these different programs. Just wanted to say too, you know, Rory Winter and myself and Josette and Ken and everybody, a lot of people, we all know each other, and we're all coordinating, and we'll all take a lot of the guesswork out of this stuff as you navigate kind of a new way of doing things in a new market and new consumer pressures.
Great. Thank you, Billy. We just wanted to connect a couple dots too between, we heard from Winter and Billy about the advantages of some out of the orchard habitat and forage for native pollinators. And that can be, can have a multitude of benefits. You know, it's part of adding some beauty to the landscape around your home, perhaps if your home is adjacent to your orchard. In addition, it helps our industry show that we are farming responsibly. It's a really clear indication that we care about not just the communities we live in, but also the environment. But I also wanted to circle back on what research that we funded looking at cover crops and outside the orchard forage versus honeybees. And that research very clearly shows that native bees in the presence of honeybees actually compete a little bit and cause those honeybees to up their game. So honeybee pollination is enhanced by having some native bees present. Little competition is good for a lot of us. So there's a little added benefit there to those native bees, in addition to the kind of less tangible benefits that we think of with beautifying the landscape and adding habitat for healthy ecosystems. Also wanted to underscore some of the comments Billy made about the potential market benefits of certifying as a bee-friendly farm. We know a number of handlers in our industry have actually provided financial incentives to their growers if they go through the process of certifying as a bee-friendly farm. To make it easier for growers, if you do participate in the California Almond Sustainability Program, I think shortly to be rebranded as the California Almond Stewardship Platform, but it's the same basic system. If you participate in that, we have synchronized CAS with the Bee Friendly Farming certification such that CAS can generate a report and make it easy for you to apply as a bee friendly farm. You have many fewer questions to answer because you've already answered them in CAS. So do encourage you to talk with your handler if that's something you're interested in, because maybe there's some additional financial benefits in addition to the free technical assistance and in many cases free resources that you can access from these three great organizations that we've heard from today. So we have plenty of time. I wanted to turn next to Ken Rapp and Christine Gemperle to join us. These are two growers who have participated, I think, in all three of these programs. So there are super users. And maybe to just start off, if Ken and then Christine, if you could just talk about what motivated you to either add a cover crop or add this forage and habitat outside the orchard. What were you thinking of when you reached out to folks like you've heard from today?
Who do you want to go first?
Maybe start with you, Ken. Yeah, go ahead, Ken.
Okay. Hi, I'm Ken Rapp, and I'm a third-generation farmer in southeast Turlock. My grandfather purchased the land in 1916, and I live in the home that my dad built in the 1940s. On my second year of the cover crops, Billy Sink contacted me, and he asked if I was interested in, or I had a place, and if I was interested in growing some wildflowers. And I did have a spot right in front of our home. It's a view out our kitchen window, and it's next to the road, and our driveway goes around it. I had an open spot there, and I was interested, so I had a place and I was interested. So then he got me in contact with Winter Bond, and from there, Winter provided me with seed. It's about 1/4 of an acre, and I planted it in the fall, and we got an excellent stand of wildflowers. And what I found out is that the wildflowers bloom. There's some wildflowers blooming almost any month of the year, and there's bees almost there any month of the year. They're not bees that I bring in. There have to be, I don't know where they're coming from, but there's always bees around. And the reason I liked the program was that it looks good. It looks good out our kitchen window, and it looks, my wife's a great cook, and she can look over the wildflowers any day of the week, or any day of the year. And it has a real good view from the county road. And then anybody that comes into our farm, the driveway goes around the wildflowers. We had a wedding there in a year ago in May, and they took some pictures out in the wildflowers. So it was quite, it looked great. There's about 22 different varieties of wildflowers. So there's some, that's why there's probably some blooming any time of the year. Some of them did really well with a lot of water. I irrigate once a week, and some do well on the perimeters where they don't get much water. So, and then some do well in the shade, and some do well in the full sunlight. So that's why it's good. There's a lot of different varieties of wildflowers. And let's see, what else? Maybe I covered.
Great. I'm going to come back to you with some more questions, Ken.
Yeah.
Christine, you, I know, are a cover crop user. In fact, I think we use your photos of your orchard a lot at the Almond Board, maybe even on the cover of our BMP guide. And you are a certified bee-friendly farm, and you have Monarch habitat on your ranch. So maybe if you could talk a little bit about what you gained from each of these programs in terms of the benefits to the orchard or to your ranch more broadly?
Oh, there's been a lot of benefits, and they've sort of grown over the years gradually. I mean, the first one was actually developing a really good relationship with my beekeeper, because I figured at the end of the day, when it comes to getting bees in for the crop, like if there's ever a shortage, I want my beekeeper to keep me at the top of his list. And he has told me in the past that when he pulls the bees out, that they're pretty heavy when they come out of my place. So I accomplished that goal. But over time, I realized that the soil was actually benefiting. And in fact, when Billy was in Rory's position, I sent him a picture once after very, very heavy rains. And I was going down the road between my orchard and the orchard next to me that didn't have anything on the ground. His orchard the water was just standing. It looked like a lake. And in my orchard, I could have driven a tractor through. So obviously I was having great water penetration, and it was enabling me to get back into my orchard without making a big mess of it. Right. And then after, time goes on, I'm finding these insect benefits. Of course, there were a lot of other pollinators coming in, and that actually, through a Neil Williams study, I learned that having other pollinators in there actually sort of makes the Apis mellifera, the honeybee, actually move back and forth between the different varieties, which is what we need for a good pollination. And then there's the beneficial insects. I remember mowing ones and having all these like lace wings like fly up my face. Actually, they bite too, and that kind of hurts. But they're actually a really good predator insect. And then in the spring, there's like totally a ladybug hatch that's off the hook. And again, these are all really good beneficial insects that control some of the pests we have. I don't know what else is out there. I know I have 6-spotted thrips, which is also good. But that enabled me to actually cut out one of the sprays that I do in the spring to prevent mites. And I really haven't had a mite problem, especially in the back piece. I haven't even had mites back there for probably over 10 years. And I stopped spraying for them in the spring like 3 years ago. So fingers crossed that we keep up that pattern. And the other thing is, it really does help with dust management. If you time, your mowing so that you're not doing when the ground's super dry, but you're still, because you have that vegetation there and you're not mowing weeds over super, super dry ground, or a lot of exposure of dirt, you're keeping that dust down. The more you can keep that dust down, the less likely you are to have a mite problem, especially with the extreme heat that we experience. So there's a lot of different things going on in our orchard. And of course, I like the wildflowers too. I just like to, as I like to say, farm pretty. Yeah. And finding a nice balance so that we can be not a part, but a part of the system.
Always good with words there. I like that. We're not apart from the ecosystem. We're a part of the ecosystem. Well, you're also a blue diamond grower, Christine, and I don't know if you want to speak to some of the benefits that particularly being registered as a bee-friendly farming have had with respect to your bottom line.
Yeah, so Blue Diamond started a sustainability program, or now they call it Orchard Stewardship Program. And if you do a number of things like participate in the Almond Board CAST program and get bee friendly certified, there was a third, and then do the Cool Farm Tool, which is for greenhouse gases, we actually get a financial incentive, which is great. So, you can get up to a penny extra per pound, which you kind of think like, oh, that's not very much. But when you're a grower, and you're producing like 200,000 pounds, a penny a pound adds up. So it's really nice to be appreciated. And then they can take that to their customers, or I should say, because it's a co-op, our customers, and say, look, this is what our grower is doing. And, they can see the value in using that as a marketing tool.
Great. Well, maybe to ask another question before we go to the audience Q&A. Ken and Christine, and actually I want to invite you in here too, Rory, because we've done research on your almond orchard. What are some of the key management aspects that have been part of your success, whether it was a cover crop or the broader habitat? You know, what were some of the things that, you know, maybe even starting out with the planting, from planting to, you know, good establishment to termination? What are some of the practical things that you've worked out over doing these programs for more than 1 year that were part of your success with the program? Could just be one thing, doesn't have to be systematic. Ken, we'll start with you again, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll give some of my experiences. My second year of planting cover crop, I planted early, and I had a huge bloom when the bees came. Also, I didn't worry about the frost danger. It was very tall during frost when the frost came in the spring, and however, I can sprinkle, so I have a way to heat up the orchard. So when on a freezing night, I run the sprinklers. But I've consistently, since I started, every year I've got a bigger crop. Now, I'm not saying it all came from the cover crop, but because I'm doing a lot of things new every single year, but it's sure not reducing my yield. And so the fact that I'm not worried about the frost danger anymore. And there was an early fear that one of my friends said to me. He said that, well, the cover crop competes with the cover crop bloom competes with the almond bloom. I don't believe that happens, because I left the full cover crop there, and there was huge cover crop, and I still got the biggest crop of almonds I ever got. So that's not a fear. Okay, the second year I didn't mow it till June, and it was huge. It was like 4 and 5 feet tall. You couldn't even. It went way over the top of the tractor. And
there's a grandchild in there.
Yeah. I'll tell you my experiences. I don't know if you can see this, but I started out with the normal blades. Can you see that? That's what I started out with, and it wore out so many blades that I switched over to these blades to take out
for your mower.
Yeah. Oh. So and then
Great pro tip right there.
Yeah. So these are way heavier duty, and that's what I'm doing now. I take out the cover crop with those just by mowing. Now, that second year when I had that huge cover crop, and I didn't mow it till June, I had to mow it several times, and then unbelievably, most of the residue was gone at harvest. However, I still was worried, so I ran a conditioner through, and that actually saved me money. The pickup machine ran so much faster, it paid for the conditioner. So I'm planning on using a conditioner from now on. I'm going to use it this year. Last year was my first year. And what else? What I forgot to tell, back to the wildflowers, I forgot to say anything about the butterflies. And it's called Monarch joint venture. And I didn't mention monarchs. So we're looking, the Monarch plugs that we planted, they're doing really well, and they're on their second year. And they're about, right now, almost 4 feet tall, and they're starting to seed, make flowers. And so we're looking forward to that. They check for the Monarch activity every month. We haven't found any here yet. However, Christine got a Monarch over there at her farm, and I got photos of it, video and still pictures of it flying around, when I was pretty excited about that. So if Christine can get one over there, she's only like 6 miles, maybe as a crow flies from us. And And they've also spotted monarchs at Modesto Reservoir, which is not that far away either. So I'm looking optimistically that we're going to get them here, and I'm pretty excited that are looking forward for that to happen. So I think I covered what I was going to say about the
That's
cover
great.
crops and wildflowers.
Excellent. Maybe I'll go to you next, Rory, if you want to add in some of your experience, since you have done both cover crops and almonds before you became
no,
project with them.
sure. Yeah, sure. Appreciate that. I was just going to mention a couple things. First of all, Ken's pro tip on the Y blades rather than the cut blades. That's going to save you a lot of belts, especially if you have higher woody material where your stand is really, really tall. I've been, even though we use a lot more solids set up here, we've never had a problem with harvest residues. We've grown these things up to 6 feet tall. Okay, so so we do a little bit more full distribution uniformity irrigation, which helps the breakdown up here. But anyway, the couple tips that I learned in the past is, number one, if you have access to a no-till drill, that's going to always give you a better stand. A lot of people, from our survey data, we're seeing anywhere from 50% to 60% are using that no-till drill. There's not a lot of them out in the landscape, but they are out there. And so what we're trying to do is internally right now develop a tool, depending on where you are regionally, where you might have access to these no-till drills, via custom operators. I know a couple up here in the North State because that's where I operate. And so all that to say, give us a call. We might be able to connect you with somebody who has a no-till drill, but that's another pro tip. If you can get access to a no-till drill, that's awesome. Also, if you're broadcasting, run a chain link over it afterward. That's always been a helpful tool that we've used. It's very simple, it's very cheap, it's very effective. One of the other things that I learned is, just like Ken was saying, I had planted at different points in the season year over year, and I had seen a much more tremendous stand when I was able to plant it earlier. And again, we're up here in the North State, so I was able to irrigate. We have a couple post-harvest irrigations. We do a little bit of fertilizer right after irrigation. We have a very high distribution uniformity because we have solid set systems up here. So up in the North State, I'm actually able to irrigate in my cover crop and really control that and manage that in a way where I'm going to have floral resources when the bees are dropped prior to the almond bloom. So if you have that kind of scenario, for me, another pro tip, get it in as soon to October 1st as possible. And if you have the ability to come in with what's already going in on the post-harvest irrigation to get that germination going, that's great. One of the other things that we're kind of encouraging growers to do, even if they don't have that high distribution uniformity, we've seen kind of in the private sector that cover crops are being planted among the water lines and the drip lines, or where the micro irrigation set are right after harvest. So in other words, where that wetting pattern is, even though you might be doing a double pass, you can still start your germination right under your tree. You got to have an offset, an offset drawbar to get your drill under the tree. Hopefully it's a smaller, kind of low profile drill. But if you can get your seed, even if you could, broadcast your seed in that wetting area after harvest, you can still get some of that germination where, we don't have this huge, distribution uniformity like we do up in the North State. So if you have a wetting area and you have the ability to get that seed in the wetting area, get it as close to October 1st as possible. If you have to do a second pass, you got to do a second pass before that irrigation, 2 weeks before that precipitation, excuse me. But those are some of the pro tips. So I'm really encouraging people to go in there and really get seed in their wetting pattern, even if they're on micro or drip, because that's going to help out, obviously, when the bees are dropped, and you're going to have floral resources once the bees are dropped and there's no almond bloom. So those are kind of some of the tips that I've learned and that we're pushing out this year. Just that.
Great, thanks. And then last but not least, over to you, Christine. Any really key observations about things that helped for success with you with the cover crop or some of the habitat? And maybe if I could, in particular, get you to talk a little bit about your use of a cover crop pre-plant when you were turning over an orchard.
Well, when We actually, I planted the cover crop right after I planted the tree. So it was after a whole orchard recycling, but it wasn't, it was still in that time period when there's a lot of woody biomass breaking down. And so I was looking to actually I knew that a lot of nitrogen is going to be taken up by the microbial activity in the ground. So I was looking to infuse some more with a legume crop. So I did the healthy soil builder. Also, there was a lot of other things in there too. And so that's what I did in a very dense stand of it between the trees, during that first year of growth. And we saw we did see really great growth that year in spite of having, all that woody biomass in the ground. And because certain areas did not get fumigated because of proximity to homes and stuff, it's kind of a hope with those brassicas in there that it sort of mitigate some of the problems that we could have. So that was one of the things. One of the other tips I would say as far as planting it, and maybe it makes it a little less stressful fitting it into your schedule. I really like to do the every other row planting. So in October, I really pushed to get in that just every other row in my orchard. And so my other rows, like Josette said, become my working rows. And then the stress is, and I do the brassicas early because those things, you plant those and they have a little bit of moisture, they're up in 4 days. They really germinate very fast. And once they're up, and if, the soil moisture, they don't even need that much. In fact, we didn't do any extra irrigations other than rainfall last year. And we still had, it was taller than me and I'm 5'7", right? And then you have those other rows to do all your work that you need to get done in the fall, like pruning, chipping those prunings, sweeping and mowing or mummy shaking, and then sweeping and, kind of gathering your mummies into the setter. And then maybe you do another mow. And then after that's all done, you spread maybe a clover seed because it blooms later anyways, and get that all into the ground. And then once your brassicas are done in the spring, that clover is ready to go up and, through May. And then every couple years, you maybe rotate it. And so that the brassicas are now in the clover row and vice versa. So I know it's a lot of information, and it took me maybe about 10 years to perfect my process, but it's working for me.
Yeah, sounds like it. Great.
And if I can just jump in real quick on that last note. Sorry, Joseph. Well, yeah, I just want to say just real quick on Christine's last note. When you start getting into cover cropping, it's not like just putting out ammonium sulfate and watching the trees respond, okay, or something like that, or some kind of bee's knees fertilizer that we've got. Cover cropping works into the system, and that's why we really want to talk about the system. Is as you start thinking about cover cropping, it's not a one and done thing. As we're kind of hearing from these growers, it does take a little bit of time to start really seeing these benefits, and really I think it's a testament again to the Seeds for Bees program, some of these other programs, that even after 2 years, growers are seeing benefit, right? So they're getting free seed for 2 years, and then they're saying, oh my gosh, I'm either seeing benefit in my yield, I'm seeing benefit in my water, my water penetration, or compaction is being reduced, or dust is being reduced. So they're seeing immediate benefits. They're just not these humongous things that you do start seeing over time. But once you start doing this on a year-over-year basis, you work it into your schedule, you work it into your budget, you start realizing, oh my gosh, this is a different system. Something else is going on, and then you start taking all these other. You take a spray out here, or you take it and you start reducing some of these other input costs, and you go, oh my gosh, yeah, that whatever it was, 50, 60 bucks per acre that I spent on planting cover crop really had a tremendous return. I mean, you heard Ken say it. He continues to go up and up and up in yield. Now we continue to study that. There's a lot of preliminary research on that, but healthier bees means more productive bees. That's just the bottom line. I mean, that's what we're seeing anecdotally. That's what we're seeing in the research as it's being borne out. And so I just want to say, as you're starting cover crop, go slow, be patient with yourself, and you'll start seeing these benefits over the year to year period. So
And you're
Yep.
you're going to get more efficient too. Oh, I'm sorry to that.
No, go ahead.
I was just saying, having great cover crop, being able to rely on great cover crop every year, it's kind of like cooking. If you're trying a new recipe, chances are you're not going to hit it out of the park that first time or even the second time. And this is what's so great about working with Rory and getting that free seed and him being able, you can call him while you're working with him. I'm an expert on cover crops, so is Rory, but we're never going to be able to tell you, give you better advice than you're going to be able to give yourself after you go through it 2 or 3 years, right? You're going to know your land better than we ever will. And so, maybe a particular year you don't have a great stand. Well, part of Rory's free seed really takes the sting out of that. And keep in mind too, if you don't have a great year, that is how you learn, right? Failures are steps to success. And yeah, I just wanted to make that point about the Seeds for Bees program.
Thanks. Ken, you have a final comment?
Yeah, I have some more comments. Before I started using the cover crops, I did 100% weed spray, and I tried to keep the soil bare, and then I decided, well, that can't be good to get the soil healthy, and so that's why I started with the cover crop. But I have one field that's extremely sandy. It's beach sand. I irrigate once a week, and the trees were needing water after the week is up. What I've found out, and I think it's from the cover crop, is that the water holding capacity has increased, and the trees are staying holding the water longer. And it possibly is because sandy soil attracts the nematodes. It's maybe the nematodes are going down. I don't know that, but I'm pretty confident that the water holding capacity has gone up. The other thing I might mention is that I plant, what I intend to do this year is after harvest, immediately float it real fast and immediately seed it, and then immediately prune on top of that and shred it. And I did that the first year, and it did not, I got a big stand anyway. So I don't have a lot of experience with it, but I had a good experience the first time I tried it. That's what I plan to do. And then when the shakers, and I plant every row, and the shakers come in for the mummy shake, and they're driving over the sprouted seed, it didn't seem to bother it. And then in January, I put out compost, and they're driving over the crop. And, you see the wheel tracks, but they seem to disappear after a while. So I do and I just sweep the mummies into the growing cover crop. And that's all.
Great. That was great to hear that experience. One question from the audience to any of you who wants to answer. Have you seen increased gopher activity in your cover crop?
I have.
Has that been a problem for you?
I'll speak to that, actually. So I was just actually typing out the whole thing. So yeah, the gophers love it. Plus they're covered. So and that can be a pain, but they're actually really active during the spring. And I noticed that as we go into summer and we've mowed down that cover crop, that they become less active making their mounds and stuff. And usually by the time I'm at harvest, my orchard floor is sort of back to normal because of all the mowings with that roller on the back. But it does help that I have a herd of cats. They're all fixed. And I have a pack of dogs, and I have some owl boxes around. And one of the things I do is, because I do run real conservative on my water. And one of the reasons is I like to save just a little bit at the end to allow me, because we can still flood in our area, to do a flood after harvest where me and 6 dogs go out and we work that field natural way. Circle of life. And
little pest management.
Yeah, but also that flood is actually also timed with the end of irrigation season, but also with me planting my cover crop in the fall. My so it all kind of, it's all working out. Yeah. And we usually, I mean, on 20 acres, we've gotten as much as like 136 gophers in an 8-hour period. That was, and just so you know, like 136 dead gophers smell as bad as one dead cow. If you put them all in a pot.
That's funny.
Just saying.
That's
Well,
a pro tip if I
yeah.
ever
Now
heard
we leave them
one.
out on the back row, the ones the dogs don't eat, so that the buzzards come and get them. So we're like feeding wildlife. So it's the
Yeah.
circle of life.
Part of the circle. It's a part of the
Yeah,
circle.
like
Yeah.
yes, we're a part of the ecosystem.
Yeah. I'll have to say, yeah, it's a great question too, because I've had increased gopher activity. I think this is actually, Joe said, I'll say it. I think this is a place where we need to probably get some good science involved. Like, how much does it actually increase? What are the costs to the trees, if at all, right? I mean, I'm just curious. There's a lot of questions in my mind. What I can say anecdotally is that yes, gopher activity increased. It appeared that gopher activity, or at least the populations increased, not just the activity. But I don't know that for a fact either. And then the next question in my mind is, how much did it actually hurt my trees and my cash crop? I'm not sure anything, right? I mean, so anyway, I yes, the answer to the question is yes. We also abandoned our drip line because we're up here in the North State. We have a whole host of problems with pests and that. So I mean, a lot of it was ground squirrels, tree squirrels. We even had, you know, coyotes and all sorts of other stuff, raccoons going after that in the hot season. So I just abandoned it. But I didn't do that solely for gophers either, right? And so I don't have a cool method of taking care of them at the end of the season, like like one of our participants here. I wish I did, because that would make a lot of sense. But even though gopher activity and populations ostensibly increased, I don't see a problem as to why that happened.
Mhm.
You know, or if anything happened. So anyway, it's just a question in my mind. I just want to throw it out there.
I
Why don't
think
you give out
maybe
free owl boxes, Rory?
Yeah, I could
yeah.
do that. I could do that.
Free
Yeah,
owl
get the
box
whole
with your
system
seed.
going.
I think the biggest
Next
risk
year's
that,
webinar, we'll talk owl boxes.
yeah, but the biggest risk the gophers maybe present is to a newly planted orchard, because they can take a lot
Yeah.
some baby trees out. But a lot of times when you've done orchard redevelopment, you've actually cut down on that population, because of all the activity in there. So, and I wonder actually, I don't know if anybody's ever done this study. I wonder, because of gophers tunneling through our orchards and stuff, is there any evidence that they actually help with soil compaction? They
Yeah.
are like opening things up underground and moving things around. I don't know. So
I've
Like
thought about the
earthworms.
ecosystem there too. I mean, the soil ecosystem. I mean, they're a soil type of, you know, we call them a pest. But I wonder, are they doing anything, you know,
anything good?
beneficial under there? I don't know. But yeah,
Right.
definitely in the, yeah. And I've seen them go after replants when you know, they're close to a replant in a mature orchard. Seen them go after those replants and hit them and either ding them or kill them. So there's no doubt that there is a danger, especially to younger trees, and it's something you got to watch out for. But that's another perfect point to say, hey, this is about managing a crop. Just like when you introduce anything into a system, you're having to manage that crop and you're having to look out for something new. So because this is a new system, because it's a new operation, you've got a little bit more to do, but at the same time, you're dialing back some of those other inputs. So it's something to watch out for sure.
Great. A last word to you, Ken, and then we'll conclude the webinar. We've got our quiz for folks getting the CCA credit, so stay tuned. But what do you want to part with us, Ken, your last bits of wisdom?
I was just going to address that gopher problem.
Yeah. Go ahead.
For sure, the gophers increase with cover crops. They're happy gophers out there, and you can't see them till you mow it. So this year, what I did is I mowed earlier. I didn't mow in June. I mowed in April, and then I immediately went in with a gopher machine that makes the fake tunnels, and I did it every row. And it seems like I had pretty good results. Sometimes I can flood irrigate at the end of the year. I don't know if we'll be able to do it this year because the water's so short, but that's what Christine did is absolutely right. If you flood, you're going to wipe out the big population. But the gopher machines seem, what's the problem with the gopher is that it's very hard on the mowers to knock down those mounts, and then they come back and it's hard on the sweepers and it buries some nuts. So that's if we go to off-ground harvest, it'll solve all that maybe, but that's a long ways off.
There you go.
Yeah.
Hey, we hope to do some demonstrations of off-ground harvest this summer, so stay tuned. Well, thank you, everybody. This was great to mix a little bit of the science with a lot of very practical grower experience, which is equally important in helping inform what works. So hope that you all left with some new insights or some things to think about for your operation or people that you advise. There are lots of resources that you can make available or you can take advantage of. Again, I'll mention the cover crop BMP guide that is on our website, almonds.com. We have lots of actual paper copies. If you ever want one of those, show up at a industry or an almond board event, and we almost always have these resources available. We did a really great podcast, the UC Cooperative Extension's Growing the Valley podcast. Spoke with the primary research who led the cover crop research program that I spoke to, Amelie Godin, as well as a farm advisor up in the Yolo, Solano, and Sacramento Valley, Catherine Jarvis Sheen. So encourage you to listen to that particular podcast if you want to hear more. Again, links to all of the programs that you heard about today, in addition to one other Monarch free milkweed program. And then just know that there are government incentive programs that you can apply to get additional cost-sharing dollars through NRCS, through the EQIP program or the Conservation Reserve program. And an easy lift is the CDFA Healthy Soils program, which can provide cost share dollars, grants to growers for a number of the practices that you've heard from today, in addition to the free programs that you've heard about. So do encourage you to look deeper into these opportunities, and hopefully this webinar was a great start to that. I think that concludes this. I want to thank all of the speakers, Winter, who's had to leave, Rory, Billy, Ken, Christine. Really great to have you and as partners in our industry.